Hello and welcome to the 2023 Future of Work Virtual Conference. I'm Panelists and I'll be your host this afternoon. It's great to be here with you all. Well, buckle up because we have a jam-packed and stimulating afternoon of discussions lined up just for you, both on CNBC Africa and on the webinar, where you can also engage with us by posing questions and posting your comments. Do connect with us on social media, and of course the hashtag to use is FOW2023. Now, the theme for today's virtual conference is innovation and leadership in a rapidly evolving world of work. The future of work is evolving rapidly and is an ongoing experiment, mostly driven by technological advancements, changing demographics, and shifting economic landscapes. Innovations that were viewed as cutting edge a decade ago are commonplace today. 2 years of global pandemic changed the look and location of the traditional office environments. And while the majority of workers are back at the office, a hybrid work from home component still clings on for many businesses. Perhaps you are also streaming from the comfort of your own home. As we stand at the cusp of a new era, it becomes imperative to understand and anticipate the future of work. First up on today's program, joining us from Dubai is CNBC Africa Executive Director Sid Wahi, who will set the tone for the next 3 hours. Welcome address by Sid Wahi, Executive Director for CNBC Africa.
As we gather here today, we find ourselves at the intersection of innovation, leadership, and the future trajectory of work. This conference is not just an event, but it's a confluence of ideas, thoughts, and visions aiming to shape the future of our professional landscapes. The theme of this year's conference, innovation and leadership in a rapidly evolving world of work, couldn't be more relevant. We live in a time where the pace of change is unprecedented, and the need for innovative solutions and visionary leadership is paramount. The past few years have been very transformative, to say the least. The global pandemic, while behind us, has acted like a catalyst accelerating the evolution of work. It has underscored the importance of adaptability, resilience, and a forward-thinking approach. Today, we will explore the multifaceted dimensions of the future of work. We'll delve into discussions on technology, human resources, enterprise flexibility, and productivity. We'll hear from industry experts and thought leaders who will share their insights and forecasts on the evolving trends and strategies to thrive in this dynamic environment. I invite you all to engage actively, reflect deeply, and most importantly, think innovatively. Together, let's explore the potential pathways to a future where work is more fulfilling, inclusive, sustainable, and resonant with our shared values and aspirations. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Vodacom Business, for supporting this event again in 2023. We would not be here without your support. With this, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mteto Nyati. He's the Executive Chairman at BSG and a visionary leader who will share his invaluable insights on the visions for an unfolding future of work. Thank you.
Keynote Address by Mteto Nyati, Executive Chairman of BSG.
Thank you, Program Director. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will kick off my keynote address by referring to observations that were made recently by Tom Bradley in March 2022. He said, I quote, "We actually used to go to work and to offices to work. Like, people woke up, showered, got dressed, and fought through rush hour traffic and the challenge of finding decent parking so that they could sit at a desk in a building to do work. Now, people work from everywhere," close quote. Yes, people now work from everywhere, or do they? What is the future of work? What does normal look like going forward? My talk today will focus on answering these very important questions. It will concentrate on what businesses and other organizations need to know about how work could shift, plus how workforces and workplaces can prepare for those changes. A lot of research has been done in this area. I will, however, lean on two research reports that I find useful. The first one is the 2022 Everywhere Workplace Report by Infanti. It is a useful report for companies looking to understand what employees prefer and how to strike the balance moving forward. The second one is the 2023 McKinsey Global Institute report that looks at how work will shift, along with trends affecting the workforce and workplaces. This particular report will help you or your organization to prepare for what's next. I will begin with the Infanti report and share some of their findings. The Infanti Survey found that nearly 9 out of 10, that is 87% of survey respondents, do not want to work from offices full-time. 9 out of 10. Second, nearly half, 45%, would be happy to never step foot in an office again, while 42% indicated that they prefer a hybrid model that splits time between home and office. One shocking statistic is that 71% stated that they would choose to be able to work from anywhere over a job promotion or a job increase. This is very important finding. Now, I'm going to go to look at the finding of the other report by the McKinsey Global Institute report. This finding came out with also 3 important points. The first one is 1 in 16 workers will switch occupation by 2023. The second point from this report is that job growth will be more concentrated in high-skill jobs. These are jobs in healthcare, or these are jobs that are in the science, technology, engineering, math field. While middle and low-skill jobs, jobs such as food service, production work, office support roles will decline. The third and the last finding from McKinsey is a few categories will see more growth than others. The rise in e-commerce will create demand for warehouse workers. Aging population in advanced economies will create demand for nurses, and teachers and training instructors will continue to find work in the coming decade. So, organizations like yours exploring future of work will need to tailor their approach to their unique context. They will have to balance 3 symbiotic elements that can provide a holistic understanding of the forces that shape the future of work. The 3 forces, or the 3 elements that I want to lend and leave you with are: 1, the nature of work. That is, organizations should be able to answer 2 big questions around the nature of work. The first question is, how do we make money? How does your organization make money? The second question, how does work get done? Because if you understand both of those, you'll start to see how you need to be designing your workplace to talk to how work gets done. So the second important element I want to leave you with is the workforce of the future. Here, people are organizations' most valuable asset. This has not changed. It has always been the case. It will continue to be the case going forward. And getting ready for the future will include us understanding how workers, the workers that you have, you need to understand the skill set that they have. And going forward, also looking at the workers that you need. When you have a clear understanding of both, this will expose the skills pools where you are either long or short on talent. This is very important for you to understand where you are so that you can put together the appropriate strategies to address this important point. The last element is the workplace of the future. The workplace of the future is a combination of physical location and organizational norms. In terms of the workplace of the future, it's really about the ways of working, making up the workplace. So once again, to summarize, what are the key elements that need to be working together? You need to be paying attention to all of those three elements. It is the nature of work. Second, it is the workforce of the future. Third, it is the workplace of the future. It's all of those combined. Now, a year ago, I invested in a company called BSG. BSG is a business and a technology consulting firm. This is a 26-year-old company known for partnering with clients to help them to implement large, complex projects. We recently moved to new offices in Rosebank. We call our new offices the BSG Exchange. Yes, this is where we exchange ideas. The BSG Exchange has been designed for the new ways of working. We use our workplace for what we refer to as moments that matter. We had to sit down with our employees to find out what are these moments that matter. And I'm going to share a few examples of what those moments are. Some of those moments are, of course, team meetings. And when you engage with our clients, client meetings. When we're thinking and coming up and problem solving, ideation, problem solving, brainstorming sessions. It's also designed for one-on-one meetings between a manager and an employee. And of course, some of our employees are highly religious, prayer meetings, meditation, the spaces for people to go and think and read and collaborate. It's designed for all of this. At BSG, we use an approach of build, measure, and learn. This approach has served us well as we continuously improve our workplace. We don't have all of the answers, but we have embraced the challenge of change. You can too. So, for businesses that hoped to just go back to ways of working as they were before COVID-19, we say to them, good luck. There is no way to put the genie back in the bottle. There is no going back. It definitely seems like the future of work will lean heavily in favor of everywhere workplace. Organizations need to accept that so that they can ensure that they can have the right tools in place to manage and to secure the workplace effectively. This requires leadership. It requires leadership that is open to exploring new ways of working while keeping an eye on the ball, that is, delivering exceptional services to clients. The balance of power has shifted to employees. We must get used to that. So, excelling in this new way of working can be a source of competitive advantage in a world where there is war on talent. So I would like to conclude with these few words from Edward Teller, who once said, "When you get to the end of all the light you know, and it's time to step into the darkness of the unknown, faith is knowing that one of two things shall happen. Either you will be given something solid to stand on, or you will be taught how to fly." I conclude. So what I'm saying, what I'm challenging you is that let's go out there. None of us know what's going to be happening. None of us understand fully the future. We need to take the leap of faith. I'm challenging you to take that next step. Go out there, try new things. Build, measure, learn. Once you have learned, continue to go and build, then measure and learn. That is the way we are going to be able to manage in this space. So, colleagues, I want to thank you. I truly appreciate your listening to me. Have a good afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that inspiring address of Mr. Mteto Nyati. He is the Executive Chairman of BSG. Now, joining me now on the desk to lead the discussion for the first panel of the day is CNBC Africa's anchor, Tanya Habimana. Tanya, what it is that you're going to be talking about today?
Well, fellas, I'm really excited about this panel discussion. We're going to be talking about leadership in a rapidly evolving world of work. Now, according to recent research done by Forbes involving responses from 500 CEOs, CFOs, chief human resource officers, chief marketing officers, chief information officers, they identify high-caliber talent as their #1 asset. Now, with talent as the differentiator, the respondents were significantly invested in developing their talent and creating new working models in which those employees are increasingly engaged so that they can thrive in a constantly changing and evolving business environment. Now, after 2 years of introducing and optimizing new, more flexible working models due to the pandemics, chief officers are now shifting gears towards developing and training employees. Let's meet the panelists.
And the panelists are Dr. Njeri Mokiru, Senior Futurist Africa for Institute for Futures Research at Stellenbosch Business School; Amado Diallo, CEO at DHL Global Forwarding Middle East and Africa; David Plink, Global CEO at Top Employers Institute; and finally, Stephen Van Coller, CEO at EOH Group.
And a big welcome to my panelists. I'm so excited to dive into this conversation. And in fact, I'd like to start with you, Dr. Njeri. You know, when we look to the future of work, we can't move forward and plan ahead without kind of paying attention to who we could potentially be leaving behind, especially when we're talking about work, which is what? Access to equality, which is opportunities. So my first question to you is, how will the future of work impact income inequality, social mobility, but also job security? Perhaps you can start us off by sharing some of the latest trends in that regard.
Thank you, Tanya, and it's a pleasure to be joining you and my fellow panelists for this conversation as part of this virtual online conference. And I think your question is a fantastic place to start, because when thinking about futures, one of the key principles is to understand the future is, as the keynote speaker mentioned, the future is an unknown place, an unpredictable space. And what we can do is prepare and anticipate for change to the best of our ability. Therefore, the future is also very much what we make of it through our actions. In terms of income inequality, social mobility, and job security, some important trends to note are, in terms of income inequality, firstly, the fact that there will be some job losses that will be sustained as a digital trends, but also population movements, crises such as natural environment disasters and climate change. But at the same time, there will be massive opportunity created by these same trends if we can suitably direct our innovation, our investments, and our decision-making in emerging spaces that have potential to grow and advance. Social mobility has always been related to jobs and work. People move to where there is opportunity, but a key trend to watch here, demographics and aging population African continent.
Okay, we've got you back. We lost you for half a second there.
Apologies. I was mentioning that demographics are an important trend to track in terms of social mobility. Even while people will move towards where there's opportunity, the preferences of an aging demographic in some regions and a youthful demographic for Africa are important to note. And job security, we're seeing trends such as the gig economy, which has raised some debates in terms of workers' rights and labor and employee unions.
Dr. Nyati, I think we've lost you again. So I'm going to move ahead actually and just bounce off your last point there with regards to an aging population, because when we talk about the future of work, we immediately go into automation, AI, into new technological trends, but we do have a portion of the workforce that, let's say, is a generation ahead or a generation older than the generation that was born with this. So how do we actually bridge those generational gaps, the differences that could come from integrating these tools? And I'd like to ask you, Amadou, how do you see how we can use technology in a way where we bring new tools, we bring new opportunities to the workforce, but at the same time we don't alienate older generations?
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me as well, and on behalf of all the DHL people. We as an organization operate in over 220 countries, and here I'm talking to you on behalf of what we call the Lions and Falcons of DHL. That means the Middle East and Africa region, which is a very young population, and we have a lot of new demands, new emerging enterprises, and a lot to satisfy. So in our case, what we have been focusing on is really bringing innovation to everything that we do, and that starts with 4 different innovation centers that we run: one in Chicago, one in Singapore, one in Germany, and one here in Dubai for the Middle East and Africa region, where we actually try and experience everything that touches technology, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and try to connect it with what we do on a day-to-day basis. Why do we do that? It's because we believe that if we want to be future ready, we have to have a young generation that is already adopting all these new technologies and applying it to their new jobs, because it helps us also in being productive. The second thing that we have done was to work with the top employer institutes. So, DHL Global Forwarding is top employer certified in all the countries that we operate in globally. And that is also the case in the Middle East and Africa region, because we want to set a minimum set of standards that are verified and certified, so that we can assure people that are joining our organization that in any place that they would work in, they will find a great place to work for all. So in order for us to do that, we have actually modernized all of our offices. So I know that somebody was talking about the fact that everybody wants to work from home, but I think that everybody wants to work in a place where they feel okay. So everybody wants to work in a place where they feel happy. So, and for us in our region here, what we have organized is that in every office that we operate in, every day we actually measure how happy the people are, and we ask them 5 sets of questions that they have to answer to, so that it allows us in a very agile way on a daily basis to know what is going on or not. And those information are actually cascaded to everybody, including myself, so that we can know how is the mood of the people in Qatar, how is the mood of the people in Burkina Faso, or many different places that we work. So for me, you know, working on training the people, giving opportunity to certify, and also helping them have fun and engaging them in fun activities are many different things that we do, including working on purpose and engaging them in social activities so that they can serve the community. So I think there are many different dimensions that you can work into to make sure that the people are working as one team, that they have a great spirit, and that when they engage with customers, that they know that it is for a great purpose, which is about making the world a better place.
And that really speaks to applying almost a human-centric approach to the future of work and to the utilization of technology. And that's where I'd like to direct my attention to you, David, in terms of how organizations are using technology and going into the future, but in a way to make sure that the human-centeredness remains at the center, and particularly when it comes to talent development and to keeping employees engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that the full leadership style and the leadership tools of organizations are changing. So what we see around the companies that we certify as a Top Employers Institute, amongst which DHL Global Forwarding and many other DHL subsidiaries, we see that there's a trend towards, I would say, more humanity in leadership. So apart from all the tools that we're deploying, whether it's HR tools or technology tools, we see that there's a real drive to see people like the human beings they are, rather than the human resources. So we look at the person behind the employee. And this is something that was truly induced during COVID times, when personal life and work life got mixed, in a forced way. And we see that many companies that are successful in navigating this and keeping that focus on the human behind just the employee or the employee number make a difference. And that's also translated, we see, in more of a holistic view on well-being. So apart from the original well-being initiatives around physical well-being, ergonomic and occupational health, well-being, we see that there's a lot more focus on spiritual, emotional, mental well-being. But that's expanding now as well to domains that we feel were not necessarily captured in the past. So next month, I'll be hosting a webinar on sleep and the role that employers have in helping their employees sleep better. Because if they do so, they in fact actually are more productive, happier, healthier. So these are things that in the past would never be considered be within the domain of an employer. But now with a more holistic well-being view, led by that human-centric leadership approach, we see those coming in scope as well. And I'm excited about it, because I think, really focusing on people as who they are with a human centricity, that's something that excites us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, I host a lot of panels, but it's the first time that the word sleep comes into one of them. And it's actually, like you, I'm quite excited because it really speaks to the 360 approach to employee wellness and to employee engagement, and making sure that our workforces are operating on optimal levels. And with that in mind, actually, because you mentioned productivity quite a bit, the other aspect to technology, and I can speak in my life, when it comes to AI, particularly to automation, is the fact that it kind of liberates us to be able to spend more time, less time on things that are more mundane. It can increase our productivity levels. And that's where I'd like to bring you in, Stephen, and how you approach this in terms of AI, in terms of automation, in a way to be able to enhance productivity for your team.
Thanks very much, Tanya, and hi, everyone. Yes, I think it's absolutely important, because if you have a look at it, I mean, I remember when I was working at one of the banks, my biggest issue was you had to employ a very large group of highly expensive and short supply chartered accountants to do credit reports, but they spend 75% of their time just collecting information, putting it on spreadsheets, and only 25% of their time doing their analysis. So things like AI and automation are really important to take the mundanity out of a job and allow people to spend more time utilizing their skills. Obviously, this has a counter side to it, which means that as an employer, you need to make sure you are upskilling your staff as much as possible. And so at EOH, we've got things like what we call My Next Move, which is just a digitized way of managing your career. And we've got something called the Rise Up Academy, and basically all our training material for all 5,000 people are on the same portal. So the idea there, the crazy idea there, is that the person making the tea, if they want to become a software developer, they can go and certify themselves with Python or AWS or Google or whatever they want to do to allow them to move ahead. So as they see that their job is being more and more automated, they can actually upskill themselves, and you have to encourage them, and as part of their KPIs, ensure that they are spending a certain amount of time every week, every month, actually upskilling themselves. And so one of the things we do as well is make sure all our internal job requirements are actually advertised internally so people can see where the trend is to more and more jobs and obviously better pay. But I think the AI point that you talk about is really important for work of the future, because it does allow people to get more satisfaction out of their job and get rid of the more boring, mundane stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of comes back to some of the opportunities, or let's say the pros to the future of work and the integration of technology that Dr. Nyati was talking about just earlier. And I'd like to bring you back in because we're looking at, the pros. We're looking at the opportunities. We're looking at the positives here. But there is a responsibility that employers, but also governments have with regards to safeguarding workers' rights. What should that look like? Because a lot of what we're dealing with has never been dealt with before. It's completely new. I'm pretty sure that when a lot of the constitutions were written, we didn't have the faintest of ideas that we would have something called ChatGPT. So how should organizations, governments, and regulatory bodies approach this in a way to ensure that we have a just transition towards a technology savvy workforce, but also protect our people?
I think the important thing...
Oh, that was to Dr. Nyati.
Thank you, Tanya. I think the important thing to note is that a lot of these changes are occurring at an extremely rapid pace, and often overwhelming our policy and decision-making processes and systems. So our legislative response is lagging behind the trends that we are seeing in terms of digital trends, in terms of new and emerging worlds of work. I think an important way to approach addressing this gap is to ensure our processes are consultative and participatory, precisely because we are beginning to move into unknown and previously unnavigated zones in the world of work as organizations, as leaders and policymakers. It's important to ensure we are including as many voices, contributors, experts, stakeholders in our processes of policy formulation and in our regulatory frameworks development. So I would say that while it's a new space for us to navigate, ensuring that we use this opportunity to include and involve as many voices and stakeholders as possible would be a good way to progress. Also to get as many lenses and perspectives on what the challenges are, what the opportunities are as well, and possible solution finding.
And Stephen, I'd like to bring you back in for that also, just to get your perspective. A consultative and participatory approach to this, is this feasible for an organization such as yours?
Yes, I mean, we operate slightly differently in that probably half my staff anyway have been working from home for a long time, because we scale up and scale down depending on what projects we do and we go and look for resource, and in many cases it's a scarce resource. But I do think the employer has a huge responsibility to be informing staff and having discussions with them around how skill requirements are changing in the workplace, and therefore what is required over a period of time to make sure that people can upskill themselves. It's no good coming last minute and saying, okay, well, we don't need you anymore because we're installing a machine. I think that's irresponsible. In this new world of, digitization, things like education material, upskilling, training is really ubiquitous and available everywhere. You just need to make sure that you allow staff to spend a certain amount of their time upskilling. It should be a requirement. And you should also be making sure that they are upskilling in ways that are important for the future of your business. If you get that right, you have a very successful business, and you don't lose the DNA by having to continually change staff or get staff from elsewhere. So I do think there's a huge responsibility on employers going forward.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Amadou, I'd like to bring you in on the same question. How do you view the responsibility of organizations in, on the one hand, ensuring that the entire team, the entire workforce is brought into this transition towards a technologically advanced way of working? But also, I mean, what Dr. Njeri mentioned earlier on is consultative and participative approach. Is that feasible in your case?
Yeah, well, so, at DHL, we have a lot of people who do deliveries, right? Physical deliveries. So those are people who don't have the opportunity to work from home because otherwise the delivery doesn't take place. Sorry, we have a lot of people who work in warehouses. Same, if they are not physically in the warehouse, there will not be movement of goods that are taking place. So, but what we have put in place, for example, during COVID times, we had a people first policy. And for example, in the Middle East and Africa region, we imposed ourselves a firing freeze. So none of our country managers were allowed to separate from any of the employees, regardless of their performance, because we knew that it was a time where we needed to take care of everybody that works in our organization. But similarly, we knew that for the people who are doing deliveries, for example, their families would be home and the kids. So we needed to provide them with technology so that the kids could go to school, because everybody was going on online schooling. So these are all things that we have been taking into account and putting into play whilst working on having everybody certified in all the level of knowledge that are necessary. So we have a worldwide certified international forwarder program that we have put in place, so where every employee has to go through. And these are now, training times that we have set aside for all of our employees, and it's actually measured. So for example, me as an executive, 15 or more than 15% of my incentive is related to having happy people, well-trained people who are able to deliver, but also aware of everything that is coming in as innovation. And I believe that, if you want to unlock opportunities, particularly in our market, that's why we generated some mobility policies. So we have a lot of people living in Ghana or living in South Africa that want to live in other places. And because we operate in all the markets, so we also open opportunities for them to be able to move. But for that, they need to have the same level of knowledge so that they're not lost when they come to Dubai to operate, because doing the same job, you require to have the same level of knowledge. And having that on a broad basis gives us a pool of talent that are having some similar capabilities, and therefore it gives us the agility that is necessary for us to be able to respond to customer demands everywhere.
And that speaks to, and in fact, it's what we've been talking about. It speaks to what they do, but linking it to the how they do it, what being the actual job, the function, the skills and the qualifications required to be able to do the job, but looking into how they actually do the job. And that goes back to the earlier point in terms of social mobility and being able to work in different locations, being able to have flexible time schedules and things like that. And that's where I'd like to bring you in, David, in terms of what you're seeing as best practices when it comes to how employees and the workforce can do their work, and also how are organizations developing the careers of their people. What have you seen that's working?
Yeah, I think in line with what I said before on human centricity, this is something we see also, particularly in the domain of where people work and how they work, and also how they develop their careers. So one of the things that we at the Top Employers Institute internally, but also with our clients, are actively propagating is to really make sure that you have policies available that are applicable to all and can be individually tailored. So a good example is that working from home. If you take the human, the person at the core, their needs, and then look at what their team needs and what the company needs, but start with the individual. We believe you can craft a culture where people can make their own choices in tune with their team and in tune with what the company needs from them. And that in turn empowers them to the greatest extent possible. And that's the same for many policies around benefits, career development, so really to ensure that there's a framework that is applicable to all, but really gives the opportunity to make individual choices in choosing the pace of a career path, the particular side roads that people take, a break. All those can be individually chosen. That's what we see at many top employers. There's no cookie cutter approach that works for everyone, but more a tailored approach based on general principles.
Thank you. Dr. Njeri, I'd like to bring you back on this actually and get your perspective in terms of what you've observed as key trends within this regard as to how employees are carrying out their work and also what their wishes are, what the next generation is looking for or expecting from a workplace. Dr. Njeri? I think we may have lost her. Okay, we'll move on and I'll actually ask a similar question to Stephen in terms of what you've observed from your team and the people that you work with in terms of what they are asking for, how they would like to do their work. Because especially with EOH, I mean, there's the team within the company, but also the associated companies. So you must have quite a perspective on that matter.
No, absolutely. I mean, we are obviously in the tech world, so we're doing a lot of software development, obviously managing services. And in a digitized world, you are more flexible, but certainly most of my staff are asking to have flexible work arrangements. They do like to see each other from time to time. So I wouldn't say they never want to go into the office, but they go into the office for specific events, as opposed to, okay, let's just go on and be there for a day. So I think personally, you know, a lot of people are talking around 4-day weeks. I don't think that's really workable personally, but I do think that a 7-day week, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day is workable, but you will work when you want to and from where you want to. So you can imagine going on a holiday is a really important piece. You take a day out of your holiday to actually do the work, deliver it, and you get paid for delivery of it, as opposed to how many hours you sit in an office chair. And I do think it's going to become more flexible. I also think from an employer perspective, you need to understand people. The more hybrid you are, the more side hustles they will want to have, and or more jobs or contracts they want to have, and you're going to have to work with that, because in a digitized world, you don't really own your staff because they can move around very quickly and get work from elsewhere. So it all becomes outcomes based, it becomes flexible, and you really need to make the workplace, and when I say the workplace, I'm not meaning an office, but the work environment needs to be very advantageous to somebody, i.e. they can learn, they can upskill, they've got flexibility, they've got the tools of the trade, they've got the ability to get mentored. I was very interested in the sleep issue earlier. We've seen a huge increase in requirement for wellness, whether it's counseling. We even do yoga classes now. We've got an online video thing where people can share stuff. We actually do a lot more in wellness than we've ever done, because there's a demand for it, not because we decided to put it out there. So the whole relationship between employer and employee is fundamentally changing, and it's up to the employer to make this your business the coolest place, the best place to work, because that's why people will then log in and get involved. And it's going to change. It hasn't settled yet, but I agree with Mteto. We're not putting that genie back in the box. But, personally, I think it's a much healthier way to work because it gives you a much better balance between work and home, and work and personal. And I do think people can manage that better on that basis.
Exactly. And as I'm hearing you speak, Stephen, I'm seeing the importance of organizations to actually ensure that they stay, like you say, the coolest place and the nicest place to work, because the flip side to the technological world in which we live in is that employees, especially skilled employees, have all the choice. They have global choice these days. There's physically no reason, as Amadou has explained, for somebody to not work in Ghana with a Ghanaian organization, or in New York with an American organization, or in the Bahamas, which means that the competitive landscape for employee retention is becoming a lot more fierce. Dr. Njeri, I believe that you're back, and I'd like to get your take on this in terms of what you're seeing from what organizations should be doing in terms of ensuring employee retention.
Thanks, Tanya, and I'm glad to join the conversation again. In terms of demographic trends, from an African perspective, we are definitely dealing with a much younger cohort in terms of our employee base and personnel. But from a long-term view, we should also begin to anticipate that this will be an older generation and quite expanded senior citizen population segment as well. And we can already see in other regions of the world, the pension age is changing. So we need to take a very intergenerational approach to how we engage with talent. People are younger in the workforce, but we can also anticipate that they will likely work for longer. And therefore, what kind of purposeful engagement, meaningful work will employees and organizations need to cultivate to retain employees for a much longer time frame, but also perhaps to accommodate a swinging door where people have more options and choices, and perhaps are wanting to engage with organizations through different types of relationships. So our human capital design, how we develop employees and our relationship with our staff cohort will be important to consider and to approach creatively and in innovative ways. Very interesting to hear some of the examples shared by fellow panelists on the approaches they are taking.
Yeah, and while I have you, actually, we had a question come through from the audience that I feel you would probably be best positioned to answer that. The question is, which theory framed the Infanti Survey and the McKenzie Global Institute report? Are you able to answer that?
From my understanding of the data shared with us, it was a survey, an open survey that was looking at employee sentiment and organizational response. I don't have any data on the methodology taken, but it would be interesting to find out to give more nuance to how we understand the findings.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for stepping into that one. Now, Amadou, I mean, we've been talking about the intersection of technology and work, how employees are navigating this, how employers are navigating this. But there's one thing, and especially it's something that we hear a lot with the generation, well, the next generation, Gen Zs, Gen Ys, is the notion of purpose, the notion of work having meaning. How do we ensure, as organizations, as employers, that still transcribes, that it doesn't just become a transactional element where you come and you do your work and you find the job that is most lenient to you being able to work anywhere in the world, but that purpose continues to be a central place in managing a team?
Well, so thank you for that question, because I think that is the most inspiring for the new generation, but I think also for any generation. The purpose of us working in society is actually to make our community better places. And therefore, we believe very strongly that, we can have a lot of team building activities, but actually, if we work with our team to go and help our communities in whichever dimension that is defined by our own people, then we have a much better team bonding, because then we'll be doing something that we can go back home and tell our parents, friends, and families about, because that is really something that makes us proud and makes our days. And you have many dimensions of that activity that are taking place. For example, in our organization, we have, our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging policy is actually also centered around what each and everybody of us is doing for the community. And we do it in joint teams, we do it in smaller teams, sometimes we do it in larger teams. When we do our Global Volunteer Day, we have 130,000 people who are working and donating time for the local communities. Wow. And that is something that is extremely important for us, because we don't share visions, and strategies. We actually talk about connecting people and improving lives as our daily bread, what really sort of burns in us. And that starts with us walking the talk in the office. So, every time I come to the office, I have to take the time to walk, talk, and shake hands with each and everybody to verify that everybody is having their sparkling eyes or not, and be able to engage with that. And that is not a KPI, that is something that we feel from human to human. And whilst we do that type of activities, it also gives energy to the rest of the team to be able to give the same positivity to customers. And when we give the same positivity to customers, it allows us to accelerate our growth without having to follow it through KPIs. And we very much believe that, because we are humans and we are dealing with other humans, and we work in an environment where we have to work on sustainability, so we can do everything that it takes to make our, environment safer, to engage positively with our customers, to help them grow their business, but still remembering that at the essence and at the core, we want to make our societies better. And we don't need regulations and policies, because intrinsically in ourselves, we know what we need to do every day to be able to positively impact other people.
Indeed, and what that also speaks to, and I'm thinking particularly with regards to how you explain the structure of your team and how you're in different locations, it speaks to an element of trust. And that's why I'd like to bring you in, David, is when we're talking about the future of work and remote work in particular, with dispersed teams across the continent, sometimes even across the globe, how can leaders promote and maintain and build trust amongst their team?
Very good question indeed, and I think Stephen also mentioned that in relation to 4-day work weeks or 7-day work weeks. However, we look at that, and I think it is a central trait that leadership needs to show. Is really trust in their people, that they're hired for a reason. They are talented, and that's the reason they're hired. And then they need to be unleashed. So rather, from a controlling perspective, we manage, but we move to trust and unleashing them and show all their talents based on that trust in their capabilities. And this requires a lot, because we have all the technology tools at our disposal to follow employees. We have all the tools available to track every single move they make, but we need to stay away from that, I believe. And we need to much more focus on the analytics to support, indeed, eradicating mundane and stupid and just not interesting work, but rather do that than follow everything. So really base the relationship on trust and on vulnerability. I think that's a key element as well for leaders. If you look at the changed view of employees towards their employer and the flexibility they require, they want authentic leaders. They want leaders that actually show that, hey, I screwed up. I didn't do that really well. I could have communicated on that better, and just basically admit to mistakes, have an open and transparent conversation, and show, just like we look at all employees as humans, show that the leaders are human as well. So I think it's that combination between trust and vulnerability that defines good leadership going forward.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, actually. The point of what does leadership look like in the future of work. And Stephen, that's where I'd like to bring you in. You gave us some very tangible examples of what you're doing within EOH, but I'd like to get an understanding of what leadership looks like in the future of work.
I mean, leadership's been changing for a while, and it is driven a bit by digitization. Things like information. In the old days, the longer you sat in a position, the more information you had at your fingertips, the more powerful it made you. Today, people have got all that information at their fingertips. I'm sure all my panelists have been involved in talking to university students, and while you give them stats, they're busy Googling them to check that your stats are right. You couldn't do that in the past. People just had to take you on face value. So the way I think leadership needs to move to, and I think it's already moving there, Mteto talked a bit about it, is that you're leading from the center, not from the top. The pyramid structure has died. If you're running a company on a pyramid structure, it's going to die even further. The further away the bottom person is to the top person, the more problems you're going to have. And so you end up becoming more a mentee or a orchestrator of traffic, I suppose. At the end of the day, yes, you're the CEO, the buck stops with you, but you need to enable people to deliver an outcome, not tell them how to do it. If they need your help, they'll phone, but you have to have this whole trust relationship that David was talking about, and you need to manage people on the outcomes. So you do become more of a mentor than an actual boss, if I can call it that. And I know for certain in my world, my staff are all expecting to be treated like adults. We're all grown up, out of school adults, and it doesn't matter whether you're 18 or you're 57, you should be treated exactly the same and have the same things applied to you. This idea, I mean, like, I don't even have an office. We sit in an open plan. People can walk in any time. They can chat to you, and it's really just to enable it as much as possible. And then secondly is making sure, and I think Amadou just having a chat around what they're doing at DHR, I think is really important, is actually being available, speaking to people, understanding what they want to deliver the best work is really important. That if you want to be the coolest place to work and you want people to stay with you, you've got to give them those tools, and you only give them those tools if you're at the center, not at the top of the pyramid, and actually talking to your staff and asking them what works, what doesn't work, what would you change. And so, we do things like we have a youth leadership team. It's really the youngsters. We, choose our top 10. They come up with the themes that they think need to change in the organization, and they then present to an exco. We give them budget, we give them ability to go and change it. And the whole thesis is that we must start preparing the business for the leaders of the future, so that when they become the bosses, the business is ready for them, as opposed to they get there and they have to start making changes. And it's a very different philosophy, because then people feel like they own the business. They are there making changes. They can make it enjoyable. They can make it fit for purpose. So the idea that the CEO has the biggest office and parking number one and a lift into his suite, long gone. And I'm afraid, as Mteto said, that genie is definitely out the bottle and we're not putting it back.
Yeah, most definitely. But I like that question, that statement, but a question nonetheless. And I'm actually going to ask it to Dr. Njeri. How do we prepare businesses for the leaders of tomorrow, for the future of work, but not just businesses? I want to take it a step up. How do we prepare society? How can governments ensure that we as a nation are prepared for the future of work?
I want to emphasize my previous point around the importance of participatory and consultative processes to ensure that we are bringing the different stakeholders on board. And then, yes, to add to the comments around the importance of authenticity in leadership, trust in leadership, but also community impact, is the value of having futures thinking and a long-term orientation in terms of how we lead. And one of the key steps in practically applying a long-term perspective is having a good succession plan in place. So understanding your current environment and also the trends that are emerging, what the skills and competencies needs will be, but also what your talent retention approaches will be for changing demographics, and putting in place concrete approaches that address the organization to these needs and to these gaps. And leaders that have a long-term perspective will also ensure that investing in these approaches won't be a short-term gains game. It will be investments that can hopefully feed back value personally for the individual employee, but also largely for the organization in terms of performance and strategic advantage in the market. These will be investments in skills building, in competency and capacity building that will have long-term benefits. So we're thinking ahead in terms of what will the world require, but also what would we like the world to look like, and therefore how can we shape the direction of growth and advancement. So long-term thinking as a key critical leadership skill globally. And putting in place practical plans linked to this long-term orientation, such as succession planning, but also having a key eye to the trends that you need to respond to for the short and the long term as well.
Okay, brilliant. Now, I've got a question that came through from the audience that is logging in online, and I really like this question, actually. The gig economy, threat or opportunity? And I'd like to ask you this, David. So the question in a bit more words is, should employers be worried from employees being able to have multiple streams of income? Is this a good thing or is this a bad thing?
I think the worry is not necessarily the most important thing. I think it's a reality. It's a day-to-day reality. If you look at the top employers that we certify, nearly 2,500 this year, we are seeing that about 25% of the employees are actually on a different type of contract than a classic employment contract. So it's not necessarily something you have to be afraid of. It's just a reality in day-to-day life. And definitely you can have rules around what people can do outside work obligations. I wouldn't say outside work hours because that's a bit fluid right now, but it's more a matter of agreeing what is possible and which competitive interests need to be protected. But overall, it's something that is happening. It's something that I think you should embrace. And also, I think there's a responsibility with every employer to treat their gig workers as good as they treat their own employees. So definitely we see differences, you see different obligations, but I think there's a moral responsibility to also invest in the development of the people that work for you on a different type of contract. And that's, I think, a next level in inclusion to incorporate them as well into your policies.
Okay, brilliant. This is how we're going to wrap up, but I'm going to get your closing thoughts. And in fact, I'm going to get your closing thoughts in just one word, if you can. The future of work, what does it look like? And I'd like to start with you, Stephen.
Definitely hybrid.
Okay, brilliant. Hybrid. Thank you so much. Going to you, David. The future of work, what does it look like?
Sorry, 3 words. No way back. And I'm happy for that.
Okay, I'll take 3 words, no way back. All right, brilliant. And from you, Dr. Njeri, the future of work.
I would say innovation.
Fantastic. And lastly with you, Amadou, the future of work, what are we looking at?
Not in one word, but it's about knowing your people, your customers, and your numbers and processes.
Knowing your people, your customers, and your numbers and processing. Fantastic. What a wonderful way to start the Future of Work conference, virtual conference today, where literally we've talked about everything from the opportunities that the Future of Work offers through technology, AI, automation, the fact that employees now have social mobility, that they can access jobs that are in their physical location, but also access jobs in other locations, that this contributes to employee wellness, that we're moving away from, well, not necessarily a 4-day or a 5-day work week, but rather a 7-day work week or basically an endless work week, but where employees are able to choose when and how they work. So whether they're on holiday and they just want to take one day to finish something off without necessarily having to go through what we were seeing previously in terms of logging in leave days, etc., where there's a lot more flexibility and work can be placed around life rather than life around work. We also talked about the risks of the future of work when it comes to, well, data, when it comes to trust, when it comes to also the risks of losing employees, because, well, we're in a marketplace that is up for the taking, where, as I mentioned earlier, employees can work with an employer that is in the States earning in US dollars or an employer that is here on the continent. But also the threats, or let's say the negative sides of AI and automation when it comes to the risks in cybersecurity and so forth. This is really just the beginning, and I want to give a big thanks to my panelists for their contributions today. We had Dr. Njeri Mwagiru, Senior Futurist for Africa at the Institute for Futures Research, Stellenbosch Business School. We also had Amadou Diallo, CEO at DHL Global Forwarding, Middle East and Africa, David Plink, Global CEO for Top Employers Institute, and Stephen Van Coller, CEO at EO8 Group. That's it from me.